In 2023, Boeing built its last one. The production line shut down. The factory went quiet. Every aviation analyst on the planet said the same thing. It's finally over. And then something nobody predicted happened. The plane kept flying. Not just kept flying, demand went up. Right now, there are over 400 Boeing 747s in active service. They are moving vaccines, car parts, electronics, racehorses, human organs, and the mail in your Amazon package. The plane that was declared dead is doing some of the most important work in global aviation. So how does a plane outlive its own replacement? How does an aircraft designed in 1966 still do things that nothing built in 2024 can match? That's what this is about. To understand why the 747 is still flying, you have to go back to the moment it almost wasn't built at all. 1965. Commercial aviation is booming, but it has a serious problem. The planes are too small. The Boeing 707, the best jet in the world at the time, carries around 150 passengers, and every single one of those seats is being filled. Airlines are turning people away. Airports are backed up. The busiest routes in the world are running out of sky. Pan Am's Juan Trippe looks at this and sees an opportunity he calls Boeing. He says he needs a plane that carries twice as many people as anything flying. Boeing CEO Bill Ellen hears this and says yes, and they shake on it over dinner, without engineers in the room, without a design, without a budget. The engineers find out the next morning, and the number they get handed is genuinely terrifying. They need to build a plane that carries 400 passengers. That's not a bigger airplane. That's a completely different category of object. The first challenge is structural. A plane twice the size of a 707 would need wings so thick they'd create too much drag. The solution they land on is to make the fuselage not just longer but dramatically wider. Wide enough that the cross-section of the airplane looks almost circular. That's the wide body. The 747 basically invented it. The second challenge is the cockpit. On a narrow plane, the cockpit sits at the very front of the fuselage and the door to the cabin is just behind it. Simple. But on a wide plane carrying 400 people, you need multiple boarding doors. You need fast loading. And if the cockpit is at the very front, it blocks the most valuable boarding position of all, the nose. So the engineers move the cockpit upstairs. They create a short upper deck above and behind the nose, put the flight crew up there, and leave the main cabin completely unobstructed. That decision creates the hump. That hump looks like a design quirk. It is actually one of the most consequential engineering choices in commercial aviation history, but nobody knows that yet. Boeing bets the company to build it. That is not a figure of speech. The 747 program costs more than Boeing's entire net worth at the time. If the plane doesn't sell, Boeing goes bankrupt. Not restructures, not lays people off, goes away. To build it, they need a factory unlike anything that exists. The 747 is too large to be assembled in any building on Earth at that point. So Boeing builds a new one in Everett, Washington. When it opens, the Everett factory is the largest building by volume in the history of the world. It is so large that it generates its own weather. Clouds form inside it. The 747 enters service with Pan Am on January 22, 1970, New York to London. 336 passengers. The flight is slightly delayed because one of the engines overheats on the ground and they have to swap the plane, which is a fitting start for an aircraft that would spend the next 5 decades refusing to go as planned. The impact is immediate and it goes in a direction nobody fully anticipated. More seats means lower cost per seat. Lower cost per seat means airlines can charge less and still profit. Within a few years of the 747 entering service, transatlantic airfare drops by nearly 30% in real terms. Flying across the Atlantic had been something wealthy people did. After the 747, it became something ordinary families did. Tourism explodes. International business travel explodes. The global economy starts moving in ways it couldn't before, partly because the 747 made it cheap enough to move people across oceans. Through the 1970s and 1980s, the 747 is untouchable. Airlines order them by the dozens. Boeing sells over 700 in the first decade. The plane that was a bet becomes the backbone of international aviation. And then, quietly, the thing that was supposed to kill it starts happening. Engines technology improves. In the 1980s, a new generation of high-bypass turbofan engines arrives that are dramatically more fuel-efficient and dramatically more reliable than anything before. Here is the rule that governed aviation for decades. If you were flying over an ocean, you needed 4 engines. The logic was simple. If one engine fails, you have 3 left. If 2 fail, which almost never happens, you have 2 left. You always have enough to reach land. With 2 engines, if one fails, you have 1 left, and 1 engine over the Atlantic is not a comfortable number. So the rule was, twin-engine planes must stay within 60 minutes of an airport at all times. That sounds reasonable until you look at a map. The middle of the Atlantic Ocean is 6 hours from any airport, which means twin-engine planes couldn't cross it, which meant the 747's 4 engines weren't just about power, they were about permission. But those new engines were so reliable that regulators started loosening the rules. First 90 minutes, then 120, then 180, and then in 2007, a rule change called ETOPS 330 approved twin-engine aircraft to fly up to 330 minutes, 5.5 hours, from the nearest airport. That's every ocean route in the world. The permission the 747's 4 engines had owned for 35 years was gone, and a Boeing 777 costs less to fly than a 747. 2 engines burn less fuel than 4. Maintenance on 2 engines costs less than 4. For routes where both planes can legally fly, the 777 wins on economics almost every time. The retirements start. United, Delta, American Airlines. One by one, the big US carriers take their 747 passenger fleets out of service. The plane that had defined international travel for 30 years starts disappearing from the routes it created. By 2015, most analysts are writing the obituary. Airbus kills its own 4-engine super jumbo program. Boeing announces it will stop making the passenger version of the 747. The consensus is clear. The era of the 4-engine widebody is over. Here is what the obituaries got wrong. They were writing about passengers. They forgot about the hump. When Boeing's engineers moved the cockpit upstairs to create the upper deck, they accidentally created something else entirely. The main deck of the 747 runs straight and unobstructed from the wing box all the way to the nose, and because the cockpit is not in the way, that nose can open. The entire front of the plane swings up on a hinge. Think about what that means. You can drive a vehicle directly into the front of the plane, not shuffle cargo sideways through a door in the fuselage. Drive straight in, load front to back, drive straight out, for cargo that is long or wide or shaped in ways that can't be bent around corners. This is not a convenience, it is the only option. No other large freighter can do this. The Boeing 777 freighter, the plane that replaced the 747 on passenger routes, loads from the side. The Airbus A330 freighter loads from the side. The A350 freighter loads from the side. Every competing aircraft loads from the side because every competing aircraft has its cockpit at the very front, blocking the nose from opening. The passenger era quirk became the freight era superpower. And it is not just the door. The 747 freighter can carry up to 140 tons of payload. That is more than any other production freighter flying today. When you need to move something very heavy, very large, or very time critical, and no other plane is big enough or fast enough, the 747 is the answer. This plays out in specific ways that you'd never think about until you need them. Aircraft engines, the big ones, not the small ones, often cannot fit through the side cargo door of a 777 freighter. They can fit through the nose of a 747, so when an airline needs a replacement engine delivered to a remote airport on short notice, a 747 goes. Racehorses. This sounds trivial until you learn that a single racehorse can be worth $100 million, cannot be sedated for long periods, and needs a stall large enough to stand and move. The 747 main deck is the only wide-body freighter with enough unobstructed floor space to configure dedicated horse stalls at scale. There is an entire industry built around flying horses on 747s. And then 2020 happened. Passenger flights disappeared almost overnight. The belly holds of those passenger aircraft, which carry around half of all air freight in normal times, went away with them. Suddenly the world needed dedicated freighters more than it had in decades. Air freight rates tripled in a month. Airlines that had retired their 747 passenger fleets found themselves in an absurd position. They'd spent years getting rid of these planes. Now they were calling the Arizona boneyard and asking for them back. Aircraft that had been parked in the desert for years were dragged out, inspected, certified, painted and put back into service carrying COVID vaccines and PP. There is also a version of the 747 that has nothing to do with commerce at all. The United States Air Force has been flying a heavily modified 747 as Air Force One since 1990. 2 of them, both still in service. The plane is chosen not just for its range and size, but because its 4-engine configuration provides a level of redundancy that the Air Force specifically requires for the aircraft carrying the president. NASA flew a modified 747 called the Shuttle Carrier Aircraft to transport space shuttle orbiters between landing sites and launch facilities. A 747 carried the space shuttle, on top of it, through the sky. If you needed a single image that captures what this aircraft can do that nothing else can, that is probably it. The reason the 747 keeps finding new jobs comes down to something its original designers didn't fully anticipate. When you build something bigger and stronger than it strictly needs to be for its original purpose, when you over-engineer a structure, you accidentally create adaptability. The 747 was built with structural margins far beyond what passenger service required, Those margins allowed it to be converted, modified, stretched, and repurposed in ways that no one in 1966 was planning for. The freighter conversion. The combi versions that carried passengers and cargo on the same flight. The military transport. The government aircraft operated by heads of state in over 20 countries. Each one possible because the original structure had room to become something else. Compare that to the aircraft that were supposed to replace it. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner is more fuel efficient. The Airbus A350 is more fuel efficient. They are both better passenger planes for most routes, but they are optimized. Precision tools. The 747 is a platform, and platforms last longer than tools. Boeing ended production in February 2023. The last 747, a freighter, naturally, rolled out of the Everett factory, the same factory that had been built specifically to assemble it 55 years earlier. 1,574 aircraft built, more than any other wide-body jet in history. The ceremony at the factory was emotional in a way that airplane factory ceremonies usually aren't. Workers who had spent their entire careers building 747s came back. People cried. A machine had outlasted the working lives of the people who built it. Production ending is not the same as disappearing. There are still over 400 Boeing 747s in active service today. The vast majority are freighters. They will keep flying for at least 2 more decades. Boeing is working on a 777X freighter. Airbus has an A350 freighter coming. The pressure on the 77 will continue. But here is the detail that keeps coming up in every conversation with freight operators. Neither the 777X nor the A350 has a nose-loading door, which means neither of them can do everything the 747 can do. The aviation industry has been trying to replace the 747 for 20 years. It has succeeded on the passenger side completely. It has not succeeded on the freight side, because replacing a capability requires building that capability into something new, and nobody has built a nose-loading, wide-body freighter since Boeing stopped making the 747. Here is probably the strangest part of this story. The decision that saved the 747 was made by accident in 1966, by engineers who were trying to solve a passenger problem. They moved the cockpit upstairs to free up the nose for boarding. They had no idea they were creating the defining feature of a 50-year freight career. The thing that saved it was a byproduct of the thing that started it. At some point, the last one will make its last flight. The economics will finish what the engineers couldn't, but that point keeps moving. Every time the industry says, it's finally done, something changes. A pandemic, a supply chain crisis, a cargo route that only one plane can fly. The 747 finds another reason to stay in the air. 55 years in, still up there, still needed. The most successful bet in aviation history, and it is still paying off.